The town that can afford $10 mocha lattes. All right.
So I've started recording.
Okay. And Megan,
Thanks, Arnie.
you're all set for scribing?
Yeah, I'm taking note, or I mean, I will take notes.
Okay. Then why don't we begin? My screen only shows 6. Courtney there?
So Doug, do you know if you go up to the top right corner and you click on gallery view, it actually will show everybody like the Brady Bunch.
Thank you. Oh, I'm on gallery view. So maybe there are only 6 of us here?
There
Yeah.
are only 6 of us here.
Oh, all right. Thank you for that, though. Oh, there's
No,
Ed.
no problem.
Yeah, Ed just joined.
Ed's here now.
And Ed is only here for half an hour, so I
Okay.
do want to drive the primary goal. And so does anybody, since we're all short time tonight, Megan's got to be gone by 8 at the very latest, at 7:30. Do we need anything to be heard from Don? Because he was here because I didn't know whether we would or not, but primarily this meeting was for,
Did we get closure on the chimney?
I'm sorry?
Did we get closure on the chimney from the historical commission?
Yes, we approved it.
So the chimney's gone
Yeah.
in the paperwork. Thank you.
We also had a hearing on Monday with the Architectural Access Board regarding the balcony and the lower entry. All of their questions were about the balcony. They had no questions about the lower entry, and during the hour hearing, they were not yet done thinking about the balcony relative to it being a special place and us not providing accessibility. So they took it under advisement and we're going to discuss it later in their meeting without our input. So hopefully we'll find out by Friday. They usually issue a decision in writing pretty quickly, within the week. If I had to guess, the vocal people that are concerned about something tend to win the arguments from my recent observations. And they may allow the authorized personnel, but they may not allow the public. We made a strong case to allow it because it's so infrequent. And then in the lower entry, my hope is that they'll allow us to not require an accessible entrance there so we can save some money on relocating that wall. I say that only because there were no questions at all about the lower entry. I can happy to share our slide presentation with you if you'd like to be informed as to the depth of which we tried to win both cases for you.
I think we'll pass tonight, Don.
Yeah, and not tonight. I mean, just
Oh, okay,
you could circulate those if you'd like to look at them at your leisure.
okay. All righty, anything else for Dawn?
I'm happy to stay as you guys talk about next steps.
Well,
I did have questions on the invoice, Doug, and maybe Don can answer those. It looks like on that invoice that you sent us that we're $35K past due. And I talked to Denise and she said that everything, as far as she knows, we've paid through $68,000. So
Yeah, we have not
unclear.
received the last check as of this morning.
Okay.
I know it was approved by the committee, so it's not of any concern really. It's
Okay.
just that it hasn't shown up in our box yet.
Okay.
I'll chase that tomorrow. I know CPC approved it, and I know they sent all of the necessary paperwork to the treasurer to write the check. So
Okay.
I will,
Yeah, if it's been issued, I wouldn't worry about it. We had a check take 2 weeks to go a block.
I believe it.
Yeah, recently. A church in Arlington Center paid us, and they are literally one block at most from the post office, and it took 2 weeks for it to get there.
Okay, I would like to, while we've got everybody here, see if there's any interest in approving the minutes that were submitted to you a couple of weeks ago for meeting number 56.
They looked good to me, except my name was misspelled. But other than that,
I will check that.
they
Sorry.
were great.
No, that was,
It's a long last name. I get it.
It
and
was, okay, I will, yeah.
56
Dyslexia
was,
rears its head.
56 is my meeting on February 24th.
Oh,
Mm.
did those minutes get circulated?
Yes, they did.
I'm sorry, I didn't see.
Okay, do you want to wait till our next?
I'm sorry, if we could, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think I saw that. I only just saw Ed's, but I can go back through my email.
All right, then I'll recirculate that. And we'll do it another time. And Ed's 57, any comments on that?
Look good to me.
Good notes.
Okay,
I'll fix the typos, sorry.
Yes, there's one typo where you have finding instead of funding.
Okay, thank you, I'll look for that.
can I have a motion to approve 57?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded, any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Okay. Fundraising / strategy session subcommittee.
So Courtney's not here, but I am aware of what she's been doing. So maybe I could just give the group an update.
Please.
Okay, so our last meeting, we were talking about a Friends of Town Hall and how to sort of go about setting that up. I reached out to someone through Friends of Randall Library because I think they've been doing a successful campaign getting money that way. And then Courtney actually spoke to Kathleen Pavelchuk, I'm probably mispronouncing her last name, about sort of the mechanisms of setting it up and how to, and just all of that. So I know that she's been working on that because I do think that getting a Friends of set up in the proper way will allow us to use that that organization to be able to do fundraising and whatnot. So that's about where that stands right now. And hopefully next meeting she'll be able to give a more of an update on that.
Okay. Andy, do you have any thoughts on fundraising and/or strategy?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, to be honest, my brain's a little shot right now, but that's okay. I'll try to muddle through here. Basically, in terms of fundraising, obviously there's looking for grants. How much we're going to be able to get until we're actually registered as a historical location, I don't know. But we need it. Someone looking into that. We obviously we hope to have the Friends do a lot of fundraising for us, but at the same time, what is the limit on this committee in terms of fundraising? I know that I don't know if we're allowed to accept donations directly or whether it really does need to get funneled through a nonprofit organization.
Okay.
So I guess that's a question is a town committee allowed to fundraise?
So my understanding was no, and that is why we needed to set up a Friends.
Okay.
And so I could be wrong. That is certainly something that I could get clarification from the town administrator on. But my understanding with the couple of people that I spoke with is that the way that this committee is set up, it doesn't have sort of the ability to kind of collect money the way that like a Friends, the way that you have to set it up as a, and I'm going to blank on the actual,
503C,
what is it? It's the 40C,
503C.
503C, right. And so I believe, I don't know, that's what I believe. If anybody else knows differently, I'm happy to.
Well, certainly in order for someone to get a tax write-off, we'd have to be set up that way, or someone has to be set up that way. That, of course, means we're going to have to, someone's going to have to hire a lawyer to do that. Right. I've set up corporations myself before, but it's more pain than it's worth. You know, and I know we do have to go through to the Attorney General as well as the Department of Revenue to get properly set up. So
Well, I think that's kind of required, and that's a piece out of it, right? So if I think about my employer matches dollar for dollar any donation I would do. If this is not a 503C, we ain't getting any matching funds. I'm pretty sure that would be true for a lot of employers.
yeah. And I do have, and I'll have to find them. I've spoken with lawyers before who specialize in nonprofits. And I'll just have to find the cards, but they may be able to guide us a little bit.
As a point of reference, do we know roughly how much money the Friends of the Library had generated? I mean, if they do work, have they tried to generate funds for a capital campaign, or are they mostly looking for sort of smaller projects?
I know they've for example, they purchased furniture for the library. I think they haven't funded a larger project, but they've certainly they do substantial sub portions of projects for the library. And I don't know, I'm not sure how much they've brought in for the library, but over time, I think they've done a very good job in bringing in funds.
Yeah, I guess I saw at one of the presentations that the Halleck's Point support group brought in something on the order of 400K, I thought. Was it that much? I thought it was substantial.
I think they are selling 2 lots to get $500,000, and then they are raising $100,000 to complement that.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So that's not fundraising when you sell a piece of property to
fair
cover $1 million bond over.
Right.
If you look at this, the biggest fundraising that's happened is probably the agricultural restriction on Carver Hill. I believe they raised through funds and grants about $600,000 for that, out of a ticket item of $2 million.
And the question is, when did they start? I mean, I think since we pushed this process out another year, I think we're at a good point to get going, but there is a lot to be done.
Yes, there's a lot, and I think we're talking about this a little bit fragmented of what we need to get done, and maybe if I try to frame this conversation a little bit by trying to share a slide here.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm sharing a slide with you guys or not. I can't
Not
see.
yet. Arnie could do.
Arnie would have to make you a co-host in order to, there you go.
Can you
Thank you.
see a slide right now?
Yes.
So I think there's a strategy for us. I think we have 3 different problems I think that's kind of a summary out of looking at where we've gone in the last couple of weeks or months. One is financing of the project. When we are talking about financing of this project, I think our conversation is way too narrow on private fundraising. And we are not very aggressive in applying for grants. Even though we turn this project into, or the building into a historical landmark, the amount, you go and read the grant that is available within Massachusetts, the maximum amount of money we're going to get through that grant is $50,000. So, you know, that is kind of a tiny drop in a bucket if you want to get grants. There are a bunch of other grants out there. So if we are going to be serious about bringing some dollars to the table, the most likely place where we're going to get dollars to the table is through aggressive grant writing. Right? Doug has highlighted on one point in time that, you know, a compact grant for the elevator, that's one way of getting it. We applied for one ADA type grant for regarding design. Every single grant that's on a table for this type of project, that is kind of an effort that we need to do along with creating fundraising. Right, so if you think about the Carver Hill, $600,000 were raised. Half of it was grants.
Okay.
Okay, it's kind of, you know, Arnie has been extremely successful in getting grants for green energy for the town. And we need to systematically doing that. And that's why I sort of think there's a three-pronged problem that we have for this committee. And we kind of need to work in separate working group to address each one of them. One is financing of the project. It's grants, it's private fundraising, and it's town funding. We haven't addressed, and we're just kicking the can in conversation between CPC funding and town funding for whatever we can't come up with from grant. And it will be significant. We shouldn't kid ourselves. The town is going to pay the majority of this bill. It's a huge amount of work that needs to do on that. Second thing is public relationship. We have not done what's necessary to build energy, even understanding of what our project is, right? And just think about the email that Doug forwarded to us from Maryland. Clearly it's illustrating people don't get it, what we are doing and what we are trying to do. You know, what are we attempting? And a public relationship of this project is, what are we attempting to do with it? What's the current status? Where are we, right? What's the scope of the project? You know, why is it so broad? How many times have we gone into a meeting where Tom Ryan says, I just want to, you know, slap some paint on the wall and then call it quit, and that's enough, right? It's people do not understand that, you know, when we do start addressing some pieces out of this project and you spend over $300,000, there's all kind of rules or regulations that get applied to it. We don't explain this to people in the town, we ain't gonna move the ball or the needle on this conversation. We have to do that. And the third thing into it, why is a project like this so expensive? And the biggest driver for why this project is going to be so expensive is, you know, public bidding and prevailing wage. That's a big driver of the cost of this. If we don't tell people about why it is, because, you know, they think they can build their own property. A building like this is about 3,000 square feet. It's not going to cost them $3.5 million. So if I think about a recent construction project we had in town, which is the HVAC system that went into the main building, to the current town hall, the total cost of that project is $1 to $1.1 million. That's a very large amount of money for an HVAC system, right? I remember on our finance committee talking about, you know, doing that for one of the churches here in town, and people were talking about the cost for that in the 50 to 100,000. So, you know, people are not understanding what the cost is and why the cost of a $3.5 million, $4 million is. If we don't explain these things to people, we are never going to get people on board accepting. You know, if you're going to do something here, it's going to cost $3.5 million, and there's a reason for it. It's regulations, and it's the law how you do public bidding. And the third thing that came very, very clear through the survey, and I think if I listen to the selectmen having that type of conversation, is there's no purpose for the building. We haven't defined the future use for the building, right? I think there's a three big component is if we think about a strategy and how to turn this into a successful thing, we have to address all of them. And I would actually recommend that we would create 3 separate working groups where we tackle each one of these components through a working group. Because trying to achieve things of this magnitude to our meetings that are frequent, details, it's impossible to move anywhere with this. And the working groups actually would come back and then have a conversation about what we do. With that, I think I've said my 5 cents here.
Can you send those slides and email to the just send the slides around so we'll have them.
Yes, I will.
That was a nice summary. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I say one thing about the grants that I've been thinking about since I had started poking around at some a while ago? There are grants that are for cultural uses, and you'd have to show that the building is 50% being used for cultural reasons. There are other grants that stipulate other things that you basically need to know what you're using the building for, right? So if we, I think that to me is a challenge a bit. If we're looking, so we can look for grants about the actual building itself, right? So the ADA grant or other grants that have to do with the actual building. But I think if by broadening and being able to look at grants that that apply to usage, I think that we could also get other monies. But I do think that that's going to require us figuring out, you know, sort of what the building can be used for. And again, that was my biggest, has been one of my biggest concerns. So.
I think for that, it will help to look back at historical use, because I do think that a lot of the use has been cultural.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can look at historical uses and extrapolate that, you know, after it will continue being a similar percentage of use. Whether it's 50% or not, who knows? You know, but we probably can figure that out based on past use.
Yeah, that's great. That's,
Mhm.
I think that's,
Is
Don,
there a reference source for identifying potential funding, grant funding opportunities?
I mean,
Yeah.
I know, sorry, I'm sorry, Andy.
There are online resources for finding grants.
Okay,
The library actually may have that. I know, for example, the Worcester Library does, but I don't know if Stowe does. I'm sure.
So-
other libraries do.
So there is a website within Massachusetts government that actually has a large information of grants.
okay.
I think I've highlighted that in some of our previous meetings. Even the grant that Megan is highlighting over here, the application for that grant, which requires some type of a major tenant in the building, you know, that has performance arts into it to be a part of that application. That grant date was about a month ago.
Is
So-
that only public grants, or is it public and private?
I don't remember.
I think the
nature of
Massachusetts, the
grants.
website is public, right?
I'm not sure about, there might be a combination of the two here,
Okay.
but the website is, like you said, Megan, it's a It's a public website. If
Oh, let me look for it real quick. Sorry.
Yeah, and I do know there are other websites and databases online that list private grant organizations.
So the one that the Cultural Facility Funds, that's through the Mass Cultural Council. But it's too important to apply for the various different community compact grants as well. In order to do this, you have to be pretty systematic. And you actually, when these grants come up, we have to start applying for them. We know what the cost of the project is. Don has not been kidding us on what the cost of the project is. It's going to be in around the $3.5 million, and we know construction cost is going up. It's a miracle if we end up on that number onto it. So from a cost perspective, we can start applying for grants so long we don't need to have a matching fund already in place for it from the various different entities.
Guys, my experience in pursuing these grants for this project over the past number of years, we run into a continued roadblock in that the grants have a timeline. You have to spend the money within a specific window and present invoices. And we've never been able to really latch onto them because we don't have a project that's in motion. And so while we can get a lot of benchmark information, and Don, feel free to jump in if I'm incorrect or you can bolster. We can get a lot of benchmark information, but I don't know that we can actually do the applications because A, we don't have a project, and B, we can't spend the money within the fiscal constraints of the individual grant. And so we've had to push back and kind of wait. The cultural grants, they've had a window that closed before we could get to them, but we couldn't do anything with it anyway because we didn't have anything to apply for because we weren't a project that was moving forward.
So Doug, that might be completely true, but the fundamental problem we have is a public perception is that we are not trying to do anything to obtain funds for this project outside of CPC or other taxpayer funders for residential stuff.
Yep.
And we actually, if you go back and read the document that we sent into CPC, we specifically in that document said that we are asking for $3.5 million, but we are going to apply. I think we listed there 4 or 5 different grant sources to supplement the project to get it down. We could never get that across to people that as we go through the process, just for the reason that you're highlighting, Doug. So you need to have the project ongoing to be able to get these grants, right? Probably most of them. That is just an illustration of we need to have, when we are writing these type of application, when we sit in front of the selectmen, we need to be able to say, we have put together a portfolio of grants that we applied for the amount of X, and they may or may not show up, right? But as a consequence of that, that puts maybe more of a burden on us as a committee, and Don, is to have enough alternatives in the bidding documents that we could cover us if we can't get the town to fund the differences between it. It's just not appetizing. Having a conversation here where we go back to CBC and say, here's $3.5 million. We need that to be able to get there. It's just we're going to replicate the same conversation we just had that was not successful. So there has to be something, more concrete in how you approach this as a problem.
I have to head out.
And before you go, one quick second, do you want to volunteer for either public relations or fundraising?
I put them in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
So
Bye.
I'm breaking Otley's rule. I'm going to do 1.1 and 2 point something. So not 1, 2, or 3, but parts of each.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
All right.
All right, does it make sense to form or find people who are interested in forming a subcommittee or being part of subcommittees so that we can break this up and just begin to move forward?
I think it makes sense. It's hard to do this type of work in a large group.
Yeah.
So Andy, do you want to be involved in fundraising?
Sure. Fundraising and the Friends, I think, work together.
Okay,
And I'm going to nominate Courtney for that as well.
okay. Is that a big enough committee, do you think?
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think so.
Adley, are you interested in public relations?
Yes, I'm happy to participate in that.
Okay. Arnie?
I could work with Atlee.
How much bigger? Adley, how big do you want your committee or this subcommittee and or, I'm happy to be your full-time guy with the town boards, et cetera, if I can provide information for the that subcommittee, or I can be involved, whatever you'd like.
I think it would be good that me and Arnie could actually interact with you on that, because the things with regard to requirements, compliance, things like that,
Yep.
those are type of documents that needs to be built into it. And,
Yep.
it's easy to build a story on that.
Okay.
So as a organizational question, these meetings we're having have to be public meetings?
I
Well,
don't believe
this-
so. You're not a majority. I don't know. I would get clarification from Denise. There's only, go ahead.
I know that working groups were ways to, God, I'm not saying skirt open meeting law, but I know that they were ways to sort of do that. And I know that in the past they had been used. I'm not sure how Denise feels about those though. So I think I'd like to get some clarification on that, just
Yeah.
for my own, whatever.
Yep.
Yeah, I do know that working committees or working groups were formally set up. They weren't just, at least a couple ones that I was involved in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it makes sense. I don't know. I think a working group makes sense to have, not in a, I don't know. But I guess if you have an open Zoom, if we're still in Zoom, I guess it could be open. I'll ask, I don't know, I'll ask Denise.
Well, I think the important piece of a working group onto it is having the ability to actually not have to have meetings to actually get some of the work done, right? And you share the information with however that's being shared.
Yeah,
To actually get down to a work product that you could bring into this meeting. This
Right.
meeting needs to see the work product out of a working group.
right. That makes more sense to me, right? So if you have all of the work done in the separate working groups, and then the actual meeting is the culmination of the multiple different groups.
Yes, and that I think is the kind of the driver. If this becomes an open meeting, we create working groups and you have to post a meeting agenda, everything has to be discussed onto it. And then, me and Arnie, two in a working group, both of us have to show up for a conversation, right?
Mhm.
To have a majority, this becomes unwieldy hard to actually get anything done.
Right.
Yeah. I just want to make sure we're not going to find ourselves in trouble for one reason or
Right.
another. It's just a good question to ask.
But
Yeah,
that's
I'll check with her.
Yep.
What's the last one? Future uses? Working group.
Your voice is cutting out.
Oh, is the last working group future uses?
yes, we have to define the future use of the building.
I mean, I will volunteer for that, but I think that part of it, as Andy was saying, is knowing, the future by looking to the past. Like you can't, like it makes sense to sort of tie in.
Yeah.
So I'd be happy to do that, but Andy, would that be something I could ask you to help me with historical committee stuff? Okay.
So I guess the comment I have on that is, we have seen various different documentation with regard to both uses of Pompo. Doug actually sent out pieces for the town hall. To turn this into something that is numerical, etc., it requires someone really spending time in trying to pull the data into a presentation that makes sense. Right? Because we tried a little bit in trying to do historical analysis on, that simple statement is Pompo is fully subscribed before COVID. Right? People are being turned away from Pompo. If you have a statement like that or a data like that to actually make that type of a case, it will be very easy to justify the current building. When we took the data that Doug provided and turned that into a numerical assessment of that, we couldn't make that case. The uses of Pompo based on documented data of occupancy of the building does not support that we are in need of additional space.
I do think though, and stop me if I'm wrong, I do think we have to go back probably 10 years because of the way that the building had been used over the last 5 years, because the building wasn't being used as much.
That is correct.
Is that a fair assessment?
That is correct to some degree.
Okay.
What is not correct in that is you have a large number of groups that used the town hall 10 years ago, right? They moved over to Pompo.
Mm-hmm.
So the probability that they are, again, future users of the town building, you can't judge it that way.
Yes.
Right.
But I also,
that's why this analysis, this is actually very, very tricky. Trying to use the past to build the future.
I do think that we can look at how, not coming up with brand new usages for the building, but seeing if there are usages that fell off that could be just different now than they were 10 years ago, but in the same vein, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does.
So I do think that, and I'm happy to look at all of that data and sort of analyze and see if we can sort of make a prediction. If we had this available, could we get groups to come in from this? Could we there's a lot of that. So I do think that, so Andy, between Andy and Doug, hopefully getting some of that data and just being able to look at, over decades, sort of what groups used it. And then from Doug, probably the last decade or two, and really sort of seeing, because as much as groups move out, I do think there's a pattern, right, to how people use things. And so we may be coming back, and using the pandemic for good and seeing sort of, how we reevaluate that.
Yes, but I fully agree with everything you're saying, Megan. It's just I'm caution onto it. This is trying to get this and get data is necessary based on our experience in the past and trying to jive this type of data. It's a significant amount of work. I don't want people to underestimate the magnitude of trying to use the past data to actually build the case for the future, right? So there are quite a few of us on here, so we should make sure that we're not overextending people across too many of these subgroups to get it done. This is challenging. I would add one more thing, and I think that maybe is more of a comment to Doug. I think the recording for space use in Pompo needs to be significantly improved when we come out of Pompo, when we come out of COVID, right? Any type of rejection, any type of documentation of space uses in Pompo needs to be done so we can actually have data when we come into an annual town meeting in 2022 for this project, that we can actually make statements that people were turned away, that we are at 100% occupancy. The documentation is just not acceptable.
couple of comments. You're absolutely correct. And the reason that the information that you were provided with about past performance at the community center is it doesn't hold water because we take all of the days. We never thought that we would have to keep track of the number of people that were turned away. And what typically would happen is 3 different groups would want Friday night. And so they got turned away and they go into the, well, we had to turn people away. But when you look at the whole week, well, you had Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday that you were available and nobody was there, but nobody wanted it. So I agree. The important part is to know now when we've turned people away. The second comment I want to make.
It's more than just turning people away. You have one big room, you have 2 small rooms into it. You know, are these rooms occupied every Tuesday between 2 and 4, or 4 to 6, or 3 to 5? You know, in principle, a calendar of occupancy of all of these rooms through a years. So you can actually take and turn it into a data-driven presentation onto it. That kind of is required to be able to make cases based on data that there's a space use needed here. So, you know, it's both a documentation of space usage, who uses the space, and how many people are actually being turned away. When we come out of COVID, you know, it gives us a whole year to do that, right? We hope to see a swing back up on this. We kind of need to see that documentation for Pompo. As well as you guys are actually open up the town hall, right? That was the piece that you mentioned with us from our last meeting. You know, thorough documentation of this type of thing is critical to get into a 2022 town hall meeting, annual town meeting.
Can do.
Just a thought on presenting this project to the public. You know, I was very impressed by the visualizations that Don did for the exterior of the building. I think that would go a long way towards helping us, you know, help the public understand. I'm wondering if a similar thing could be done for the interior space, you know, particularly the main hall, looking at it, you know, from the entryway, something that would, you know, be reminiscent of what the building was and what it could be.
Another thought is, in terms of public relations, is perhaps doing a video walkthrough of the building,
Yeah.
pointing out the historical features as well as the problem areas and what needs to be fixed and why it's important to fix it. I think if we have that on the website, on Stowe TV, and other, you know, YouTube, whatever, I think that would be a great resource to be able to have.
I would bet Jonathan would be up for walking through and doing something like that. Like, I think I like this idea a lot, and I think that's something that we could pitch to them.
That's in Courtney's wheelhouse. She spoke to me 2 weeks ago about setting something up with Stowe TV to do almost an interview of past users and historical people in the town hall itself and make that available. So Courtney has her finger on the pulse of that. I'm not going to commit her to that project, but she's done some initial investigations on that. So Adley, I'll make sure in the next couple of weeks that the gatekeepers for both the community center rooms and the town hall rooms have some way of marking all of the information. And if an idea comes to you as to what some sort of a checklist might include, more than a box that says duplicate interest for this date, don't hesitate to let me know.
Sure, I can craft a draft scheduler that would be useful. I kind of would appreciate if we do something like that, that actually would be an electronic document. So we can retrieve the times out of it from the electronic
Yeah, because right now,
things.
we have volunteers primarily doing it, and the volunteers change all the time, and there's a lot of work involved in renting / utilizing these spaces. So we're going to need a lot of professional help to develop something that is bulletproof for volunteers.
So I guess my only question to you is are we using something like an Outlook calendar or something like that as a reservation system?
I believe they
this?
do. Yes.
So that's kind of an electronic record keeping that we should be able then to keep, and then we just need to add on top of that. And that calendar somehow needs to be accessible for us to retrieve data
Right.
out of it.
Yeah. Quite frankly, we're all guilty. It was just never thought it important to note how many times we weren't able to.
It wasn't important in the context of what the work that's being done in the buildings by itself. It's just a value added activity for our working group, what we're doing for the town hall restoration.
Yep.
Right. So it has nothing to do with the daily work that you guys are doing.
Yep. Don, do you care to comment on the possibility of generating a line drawing of the new interior as it would be?
Well, we have done that sort of thing for other projects where we showed the existing interior and then showed the changes in particular in the Great Hall is what I'm thinking of. In this case, it would show, getting rid of the storage cabinets and expanding the stage and showing the ramp. And also could be done with showing various uses and lighting options. We've done animations for that as well. We could share those kinds of things with you to see, if there's some interest in doing some version of what we've done before that helped communicate to a town how something was going to be modified.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful if we can see what you've done and see if there's something that says, yeah, I like option B.
Sure. Yeah, we could do that at the next meeting if you'd like.
Okay. Anything else?
You'd asked about timing on grants, and that's always been a problem. The MPPF, Massachusetts Preservation Projects Fund, has become much less flexible over the recent years, and they don't offer more than $50,000 match, and it has to be done within a certain time period. The deadline for the current year has already passed as of March 19th, and the next one will probably be about this time next year. But they require first of all that you need to be on the State Register of Historic Places. They won't take any other applications otherwise, and that it has to be specific to preservation. They wouldn't fund, for example, the effort for accessibility, but something like the windows could easily be funded by them, provided it fell within the time frame, and it could fall within the time frame for next year. The thing that you'd need in addition to the information you already have would be not just the nomination having gone through, but also a prioritization of restoration issues to show that the windows are high on the priority so that they can easily fund it, because they require an understanding of how whatever you're asking for fits into the whole of the critical needs for the building. I've been very involved in those applications. I've been less involved in the Cultural Facilities Fund, although some of our projects have received those funds up to $250,000 for 2 of our projects, but we weren't directly involved in putting together the applications for those. They were done apart from needing our services. And I think that Megan had mentioned they require a cultural component. They're pretty competitive. And the jobs I know that received it were pretty prominent. The Paul Revere Education and Visitor Center, for example, and the Lexington Visitor Center, which have huge impact on the public. But I don't know what other kinds of things they funded. I've never looked into that directly. There are other funds. So the Boston Foundation, which may or may not just include funding for Boston, has a pretty extensive list of grant assistant agencies as well, which might be worth looking at.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. I could be of help, I think, with some of the public relations issues in that I read all of the comments from the survey. A lot of them are fairly extreme and ill-informed, but it's good to take some of the gist and approach those in a presentation. The armchair code consultant that says you don't need to do anything in historic buildings because it's not necessary. It's just, inaccurate. But rather than, approach that as a criticism of the person who said it, you make sure you build into the presentations the information that debunks those myths without saying you're debunking myths. And one example comes in, if you were to not incur the need to do full accessibility for this building, what could you do? What would that project look like? And the funding limit is so low relative to the rules. It would be good exercise to do that and say, well, you could do this. You could paint and you could not do much else. So people understand the difficulties, as was said earlier by I think it was Atlee that said, people don't understand why the scope is what it is. So there's a lot that can be done just in the information that's provided in the presentation to help those who are listening realize that their primary criticism and beef was not of merit. The other thing that seemed to come through strongly is most of the people didn't realize that even if only CPC is partially funding the project, if it's half, that tax money has already come out of their pocket. They made it sound like everything was a new cost to them, which is not true. So the ability to see how the project is funded is important, and to show that it's not fully funded by any new taxes. What I've seen in other projects where there was a very strong effort to do fundraising is that the request to town meeting was not to rely on the fundraising or make it contingent upon the funds being raised, but rather to show that the effort is strong and real for trying to get grants. Because frequently you need the project to be a project before you will ever get a grant agency to give money for it. So it's a chicken and egg thing. You have to say, these are the things we're looking at and that we hope to get and we feel we have a good chance of getting, but we don't have any of them yet. So that people realize, okay, you're making every effort you can and we appreciate that. But the funding source from the town, if there is such, has to be voted on based on none of those actually coming to pass because you don't have any of them yet. And then anything you do get helps offset that cost. So that's the way I've seen it presented before, and it's been successful. And it's very honest and transparent. It's not smoke and mirrors. It's not, we hope to, but rather we are applying for and feel we have a good chance to get X, Y, and Z.
One other critical piece of information that I don't have, and Megan, this might be right in your ballpark, is what's the most effective way to reach the greatest number of town folks, town residents?
So right
And
now,
it's-
I would say Facebook is definitely the best way to reach the largest groups of town. There's a very robust kind of moms group that you definitely that I would not feel comfortable bringing anything to at this point. But once we get the ball rolling on things, I absolutely would do that. And there are a couple of Town of Stowe pages. Denise has the one that is, it's like the official page, and then there's like an unofficial Stowe page. I think those are the main ones, but I do find that that's the quickest bit of information. I do know, like, my neighbors around here who have been around for a while prefer the Independent. They get their information that way. I wanted to pop in quickly. I just heard from Denise, and she said, as long as there's not a quorum of members, we can certainly have these working groups and not have to do open meeting. So I think that's great and something we can actually move forward on and get some things accomplished with these small working groups. So that's great. Yeah, so that would be my suggestion as far as how to get the best way to reach out to people right now.
Okay. That'll get your attention. Okay, it's 8 o'clock. Megan needs to go. Do we need to talk about anything else
Well,
or?
do we need to approve that invoice, or does that have to, the one you sent, or does that have to have?
Um, Did you were satisfied with the answer to the question?
Yeah, I was, as long as, yep, we're not
Okay.
writing
Oh, thank you for
we're
bringing
not
that
past
back
due on
up.
our accounts. That's something I worry about.
Yeah, me
Professional.
too.
So,
We don't require you to write the full check. We just acknowledge if we haven't yet received.
okay, all right, that's good.
So is anybody else ready to approve the invoice number 5, I believe? Yes, number 5.
I make a motion to approve invoice number 5 for payment.
And
Second,
that amount is 44,633.98, 44,633.98. Here a second?
second,
Second by Arnie. All those in favor? Unanimous of those voting? Okay. Do we need to discuss anything else tonight?
No.
Okay, I'm sorry?
For our next meeting, I guess the only comment I have would be good to see some draft work plan for each of the working groups. So, this is not going to happen, doing the stuff we talked about. There's not happening in overnight, but we should be able to craft a plan how each working group proposes to tackle the problem and try to work through.
Okay,
And on that, can I just propose that we move our next meeting till like May? Because, well, I mean, I can't do 2 weeks from now, because it will be school vacation, but other than that,
pretty much everything moving forward of any significance will be, Don's gonna need some guidance and he's gonna have some presentations from the subcontractors. And as he stated in his last group, and at our last meeting, there's a momentum that we need to keep moving forward with all of the subcontractors that have started work on the project. So why don't we toss around some ideas for a possible date? But the reality is May's not all that far away. But yeah, because that's only 3 weeks out. I asked that with a question mark. I'm sorry.
What I'd like to do is just go through the results of our lighting consultant and acoustical consultants' recommendations. And Doug and I need to circle back with Stowe TV to go through the audiovisual recommendations so that we can talk about that scope. Because if we were doing a full-blown project that everybody supported, we would want to incorporate all of this into the project. We may not want to incorporate it all. We may want to have some alternates. The other piece of it is I'd like to discuss how we do a legitimate cost estimate with our cost estimator, with a pretty robust set of drawings that has all the scope defined and that may have a much wider range of alternates than we would ever put out to bid, but it enables us to have the ability to sort of discuss the project alternatives with the public in a way that's substantive. So before I send my work to the cost estimator, I'd like to review with you how I want to structure it. Since that's a very deliberate process, I don't want to do it without your input. So we basically need a design meeting, even though it's not related to the working groups. But our role of finishing the construction documents is predicated on us doing the right sort of approach to that before they go into the drawer for a bit here. So,
Is
I mean,
3
if we need to
weeks
wait, we need to wait.
is 3 weeks too long for that, Don?
No,
Okay.
no. That's fine.
All right, then Megan, we'll try for early May for our next meeting. That'll give time for the subgroups to get some traction and get some questions into me. I'm gone all next week. So if you send me emails, they may just sit and languish. But other than that, anything else by anybody? Hearing none, a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second,
Seconded by Arnie. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. I hope we
Thank
got
you.
you in and out in time.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, good night.
Good night.